Welcome to the Bernadette Joy Show, Crush This Debt, live recording from the Charlotte Shout Festival. My name is Andy Go, and I am here to introduce you to our host, Bernadette Joy. But first, let me tell you all a little bit about what we're doing. Bernadette and her husband have crushed over $300,000 worth of debt, including recently paying off their house to become 100% debt-free in the last few months. So she's now on a mission to help eliminate $1 million worth of debt from other people's lives, and is here today to share that knowledge, share some stories and some tips to help everybody listening join her campaign to crush $1 million worth of debt and love their debt-free lives. So everybody here, Coco director and Charlotte Shout, give a big, warm round of applause for Bernadette Joy.
Yay! Thank you. I asked Andy to do that because he has the best podcast radio voice. And thank you so much to everyone for coming today. This is an exciting day. This is a little bit out of my comfort zone because we're doing this completely live here from Coco and the director in Uptown Charlotte. And I want to give a huge shout out to Charlotte Shout, which is the city's 250th anniversary. Isn't that awesome?
That's amazing. 250 years of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Whoa, yes. And we're here kicking off 3 days of live podcasting with some other amazing podcasts. So if you are in town and want to check out some other cool podcasts that are happening in Charlotte, you can come by Coco and the director and listen in live. And you can even be part of some of these podcasts, including today's recording.
You could buy us coffee too.
Oh, yes, please do. I do a mocha latte, so in case you're wondering what my order is. And I'd love to give a huge thanks to Brian and the Queen City Podcast Network for having us today. He is doing 3 days of a lot of work, so I appreciate being able to do this live recording. And I also want to give a huge thanks to our partner, who is Family Wealth Partners. They're actually our sponsor for the podcast today, and they're actually my financial planners. And Leo's in the audience going, woo! And they're going to be helping us out in terms of sharing some more information and some other events that are going to be happening around the city, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this mission. So Andy mentioned $1 million, and I am here. He's making it rain.
That's what you do, right?
Yeah, you make it rain. So $1 million of debt that I'm looking to help other people pay off in their lives. And so why am I doing this? Long story short, as Andy mentioned, I just became recently debt-free, which I'm super excited about. 100% debt-free, so that's including the mortgage. Yay! And I, in the last month, and we were just talking about this right before we got on the live podcast, is that I've had a lot more freedom and a lot less stress. I was just telling Andy that I'm doing things like in-home yoga,
Yeah.
which is pretty fun. And next week, I'm going to be starting to take singing lessons and doing some cool stuff. And part of the reason I'm able to do that now is because don't have to worry about the finance part of those things, because all the money that I've been paying towards things like, you know, house payments and student loans and things that people pay for, like credit cards and stuff, I'm now putting towards things that I really enjoy doing. And my friends have even said seem a lot happier the last couple of weeks. And so I thought, you know what, this would be really amazing if other people had this opportunity too, to, you know, one of the questions that I thought to myself, and actually recently, my husband and I, AJ, we just went to our first trip in a long time. We just came back from Italy, which was super fun. And I learned about Michelangelo. I learned that, you know, obviously he's this amazing, you know, artist from the Renaissance, and everybody knows him. But what I learned on one of these walking tours was that he was actually adopted by this super rich family in Florence. And that's how he was able to spend 4 years just painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And that got me thinking, well, imagine all the things that people would be doing if they weren't having to worry about making money or paying their bills, right? So I had this idea that I wanted to help people do that, release their genius through financial freedom. And I thought, you know, $1 million is a good number. It sounded like a good number to start off with.
Right. And you're actually a little bit of the ways there too, I believe.
Yes. So what's exciting is that I did a little bit of a soft launch of this campaign earlier this year. Before I became debt-free with the house, I was debt-free of all of my other things. And just have been putting out tips and putting out the podcast that we've done together, Andy. So the first season of the podcast is Crush This Debt, and it's 10 episodes that Andy worked super hard on, and I just talked, and then he made it sound really good. Really good. And people started listening to that podcast and then following us on social media and kind of following the tips along the way. And as of last night I looked at the numbers, and we're almost close to $300,000.
$300,000? So you're already more than a quarter of the way to your goal.
More than a quarter of the way towards $1 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I've been super excited about that. But that has been just through people hearing about us. So opportunities like this to be able to share the actual mission is something that's really going to be important in getting the next $700,000 in play. So that is what we're here to do today, is to share more about that $1 million mission, and really it's just to share more information. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are some stories of other people who have been paying off their debt, and I'm going to share a couple of people here, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about my story, and most importantly, answer some questions. So since I've paid off the house, I've gotten a flood of questions from people asking how we did it and what are some tips that they can do to do that. So we're going to be answering those questions throughout this. And if you're listening today, if you have a question, feel free to submit that question to us, and we can answer it live on air today. Does that sound good?
I love it. Let's do it.
Yes. So the first thing is I thought it would be helpful for no one else other than Andy to talk about his journey recently. And I'm really excited about him because I think he's had a pretty exciting last couple of months. So let's start off with, obviously you and I met on the podcast, right? And at the time, you were in a full-time job.
That's right.
Right? And recently, you've decided to become your own boss.
That's right. Yes, it's perhaps the best or possibly the worst decision I've ever made, but time will tell. No, it's actually a fantastic business. Consulting and producing podcasts full time, so working with clients just like yourself to create shows just like Crush This Debt.
Yes.
So that's an awesome place to be able to do that full time. It's really kind of a I don't know that it was ever my dream, but I feel like in the last year or so I've realized that it's my dream and treated it as such, and that's a really cool place to be for sure. Absolutely.
And I was so excited when you decided to make that choice, because I remember us, going through the motions of recording my podcast, and you had such creative ideas, and you were so great at coaching me, because this is my first time doing it, and I always thought, like, if you could make this your full-time job, like, you would be so amazing at it. So the fact that you're doing it full-time now is super exciting. But question for you is, how did that decision impact you financially?
Absolutely. So it was definitely a big financial thing to consider, right? Because full-time job, you've got that steady paycheck, that direct deposit hits every 2 weeks, and it's I
miss that sometimes.
Right. It's just, it's a very comfortable place to be, and there's a peace of mind that comes with that is that's hard to give up, right? Yeah. And especially when you do make that transition and you flip that switch, you're in this mode of having to obviously come up with revenue constantly to be able to make up for that. So it's a big sort of thing. And when I made the switch, obviously right out the gate, I had a few clients, but I certainly didn't have anything to replicate what I was making at my full-time job, which wasn't all that much anyway, but still, it was definitely obviously a step back. And also in that time, I've had to make investments in my business, things like my marketing, my branding, different just small things that go towards building a business that's obviously then something that you can promote. So there's a lot of costs that were involved there too. Absolutely. Obviously, the cost of just living is there, so
you also have to finance the person who's actually doing all this stuff,
exactly.
Which is you.
Yeah, right. So financially, it was a huge thing. So I actually, when I was working in my full-time job, I was relatively debt-free, right? We've talked about that. No credit card debt.
You're already pretty smart about your money.
Thank you. Yeah. Try to be, I don't have a car payment or anything like that. I try to live fairly minimalist. I'm almost
I've been to Andy's house. He's pretty minimalist.
it's I try to keep that stuff, the debt specifically down. I had some stuff with my student loans when I was younger. I'm about ready to pay those off, but obviously that experience has really informed me how important it is to have your debt under control, especially when you're doing something like starting your own business.
Yeah.
But that said, I don't have a whole lot of just straight up cash savings to just throw at my business. I have
a lot of
little
people
bit of
don't,
runway.
right?
Yeah.
Most people don't, and I think that's also something that prohibits a lot of people from starting a business, is thinking that you need to have this huge pile of cash to start a business, and you are able to be really smart about it and think about what you could do right now, right?
Well, yeah, luckily enough, I did have some cash savings that I could use to help myself along in this time, in this period. But ultimately, what I had to end up doing is taking on some debt. Putting some stuff on credit cards, working with some of these LinkedIn coaches and branding, partners that I'm working with. I mean, that stuff costs money. Those are capital investments I have to make in my business. I have to invest in things like microphones and mixers and recording gear and all that stuff. And that stuff is not cheap. The last microphone I bought was $400.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
For a microphone?
And that's a mid-level microphone for that type.
Dang.
Right. So this stuff is not cheap. So Brian knows, man. Shout out to Brian. He spent a lot of money setting up this setup, even though it looks pretty minimalist here. It's still, there's a lot that goes into it.
I'm afraid to touch anything now. I'm like, wait, I'm not going to break anything here.
Yeah, it's not that bad. But the idea is that I still had to go into some debt.
Yeah.
But I think, to your point, Bernadette, I think one of the things you stress is the difference between going into debt because your spending habits are out of control and you're not really able to keep track of the money that you're spending. And
you're not being mindful about it.
Right, and especially if you're putting it on a credit card, that can really get serious pretty quick.
Yeah.
But, in my case, I've been lucky enough to, I had to put some money on my credit cards, and, so I have a little bit of a balance now. But as business is picking up, and business picks up every day,
yeah.
I know that not only will I be able to pay off that debt pretty soon, but I'll also have a higher ceiling to make money than where I was when I was working at my 9-to-5 job.
Absolutely.
Even though getting that paycheck every 2 weeks, direct deposit, was nice and comforting and all that, it really kind of locks you into that position, and you really can't move any higher than that. But now with owning my own business, I have no cap, no ceiling, nothing that's going to hold me back. So it's really just about my own ambition. Yeah,
and I think that's a really important point that I stress with a lot of people that I'm working with now, is a lot of people have reached out to me because they're in a job that maybe they don't love, and they also maybe have some debt. And they come to me and saying, like, you know what, if I didn't have this debt, I would be doing X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people have seen my journey in quitting my day job and starting Dressed, my first company, and now doing this consulting stuff. And so some of the things that I work with people is, okay, well, what do we need to do to get you to that spot? And sometimes part of it in CRUSH is actually an acronym. The S stands for sacrifice, right? Some of the things that you have to kind of give up in the interim to make things work in the long run. But the H is hustle, right? So a lot of what I work with my clients is, okay, what can we do to increase your income? Right?
And I hear so many financial experts always saying, don't buy that latte, or don't buy that, don't go get that drink at the club.
We're saying this while we're at a coffee place.
Right, exactly.
Right
but seriously, so much financial advice comes down to save, don't spend any money that you don't need to, when really that's a terrible, I don't think that's a great way to live your life. How about you make more money so you can afford those lattes and take the trip, and that sounds a lot more appealing to me. Yeah,
and so that's kind of my approach lately, and I think that's where I want to spread more knowledge about that, is that it is possible to live a debt-free life. It is without having to give up everything. And sometimes, again, you might have to give us some things in the short term, and that's kind of my philosophy, is like, what are the things that maybe aren't adding as much value to you? So if we are talking about those lattes, right, and you're starting up this business, like maybe you do give up lattes for the next couple of months in order to save up for that microphone, but then once you get the microphone, go back to get your lattes. That's totally fine, right? So I'm curious, how has your lifestyle changed since starting the business?
Well, it's definitely, I've had to make some adjustments, especially from the financial standpoint, obviously. And when I first started, Bernadette, you and I sat down and looked over my budget, and you gave me a lot of great, really super helpful tips to
That was
take a
super
look
fun
at.
for me. I'm such a nerd. I love looking at people's budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really eye-opening to me to think about like all the things that I had to kind of rearrange or reprioritize in my own system. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing in terms of, spending money on like clothes and Amazon purchases and stuff like that, stuff that was eating up a couple $100 a month. Otherwise, I had to take a real hard look at that and really pare that down. So,
Yeah.
but that's something that you helped me see. Obviously, I think of those as temporary sacrifices, just like you said, because once I've built the business to where it needs to be and the money's coming in, then I definitely expect to go back to buying useless stuff on Amazon, like any good American should.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what was really interesting about doing that exercise with your budget was that you actually, like I said, you're already pretty smart to begin with, but it was more a matter of, okay, now we know we have this next venture that you're doing. Where can we reallocate some of your resources so that we can make that work also? So, and knowing that your income was going to be fluctuating too, right? So, I'm curious, how's your family reacted to this change in your life?
My whole family is teachers, right? Like all of them. My aunts, my uncles, mom, dad, everybody, elementary all the way up to university. So there's no entrepreneurs in my family at all. And when I told them what I was doing, they were really worried about me, to be honest with you. Because again, to them, starting a business is, I think, a lot more than what it really is. Especially, with this industry, in this kind of service industry that I've chosen. I don't have to have a brick and mortar location. I don't have to pay for insurance. I don't have to, have inventory or anything like that. So I think it's not quite what my parents picture in their head, but they know that there's a chance that and it statistically plays out that I don't know, a big chunk of businesses that start fail. It's
I think within the first 3 years, they say usually.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a statistic out there, some percentage of businesses that fail in the first 3 years. So I'm sure they're naturally worried about it. But at the same time, I don't know that they fully understand what I'm doing, and I can't slow down what I'm doing just to appease them or bend over backwards to make sure that they're comfortable with what I'm doing. At the end of the day, I don't care whether they're comfortable with what they're doing or not, with what I'm doing or not. And I know that sounds cold, but like
No.
I can't be, as an entrepreneur, you have to be focused on what you're doing. You have to be committed to your vision, and you can't let anybody, family, friends, no matter who it is, tell you can't do what you do, because they just don't see the vision that you do, right? They don't share the vision that you do, and they might never see the vision the way that you do. So
Absolutely.
You have to pursue that no matter what people say.
And I think that so relates to, I can relate to that too. I have, very traditional Asian parents that are like, you're either going to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. My mom and dad and my brother are all accountants. So for me to not be an accountant was one thing. For me to then quit my very nice job and then be like, I'm going to start like a dress rental business and I'm going to do things like podcasting. They're like, what are you talking about? That's the same way that it kind of went down with our debt-free journey as well. My husband and I, AJ, we had to change a lot of things in our lifestyle. So things that we used to do, or things that are, like, for example, trips and stuff like that. Like, we didn't do it for the last couple of years. And they were like, that to them meant they thought that we were in trouble, like financially, when actually we were probably in the same spot that a lot of other Americans are in, but we were just choosing to do something different and work off paying that debt. And what's been interesting is now that we're completely debt-free, that vision is like very palpable now. So now they understand why we did it, but it took 3 years for them to figure out that, it was worth what we were doing, right?
Right, exactly. Again, it comes down to you having that vision. They didn't see that vision, and that's too bad. It'd be great if they could, but you got to be true to what you do. And, another one of the things that I really like about that and the podcast that we worked on, Crush This Debt isn't just about talking about how to budget and how to, pay off a lot of debt in a short amount of time.
Although they do love that stuff, but it's
yeah, of course. And there's great information in there about how you did it, obviously. Anybody can listen to it and figure out exactly how you did it. But I think what really sets your podcast apart is the way that you are able to destigmatize talking about money within your family. Obviously, if you listen, there's an episode where you talk about, bringing the subject up with AJ, your husband, and telling him about the debt that you had acquired. Then there's episodes where you talk about your family and telling them about your debt goals and your money goals and how you can't, do certain things because you have to adhere to those goals. And so often, I feel like it's so taboo to talk about money in our society, and that's such a terrible thing and really a destructive thing too, because you see what happens is that even though your parents, who themselves are very smart financially, right? They're accountants and finance professionals.
And your parents are teachers, right? So obviously very educated
right.
also.
So, it should be easy to talk about these things, but it's not. And what you hear in your podcast is that your parents didn't really jive with what you were saying, and once you dug a little bit more, they weren't even really communicating with each other, and that leads to a whole host of issues. And that happened to me too.
Yeah.
That happened to me too when I was going through college and getting my student loan debt. I racked up a ton of student loan debt, more than I thought I was really doing, of course, because that's
as most of us did.
Right,
yeah.
right. But I got into some trouble like trying to repay that. My parents, my sister had to pick up some of those payments for me, and it really caused a huge rift in my family. Right, really, really. Almost tore the family apart. And in fact, I remember talking to my sister one time. We were arguing, and I said, "Well, it's just money. It's just money. It's just not everything. It's not everything," which is true. But my sister said something that's also is true, which is that, yeah, it's not everything. Money's not everything, but money can tear apart your family.
Yeah.
And I realized,
and we've seen it. Tears up marriages. Tears up. I know people who were business partners and don't talk anymore because of money and all that stuff. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that communication is so key, and I think that's one of the cool things about what you're doing, Bernadette, with the podcast, with everything else that Crush This Debt is that you're helping to destigmatize that inability to talk about money because, we shouldn't know what our coworkers make, or, we don't want to talk about this. Yet we want to post pictures of our travels on Instagram and our new Prada shoes and all that. So, I don't mind all that, but we definitely need to be more financial literate, and you're helping to do that every single day.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for being super transparent about it, because it's not easy to talk about this, especially like we're in a public place right now. We're talking about this, and that's kind of the whole point of this $1 million mission is what can we do? The $1 million is kind of, a benchmark for me to look at, but I want to think about that $1 million as a whole slew of decisions and choices that people are making to get to that $1 million, and those are the things that I really care about. Those are things that, if getting in the course of $1 million, we're also helping people repair their relationships, get jobs that they really like doing, starting businesses that they love, spending more time with family or friends and traveling. That's the piece that is really important, and so that's why we're here today. So before we cut to the break, I want to ask you one more question. So if you could give advice to someone who is starting that business and looking to stay financially savvy about it, what would you tell them?
Have deep pockets going into it. But seriously, really do a financial check before you make that jump to make sure that you can do it. Like, dead serious. Like,
Yep.
I couldn't do what I did if I didn't have a certain amount of money in the bank. I couldn't do what I did if I didn't have a certain amount of room on my credit cards.
Right.
I couldn't do this if I didn't have a certain amount of money coming in, so at least I knew like what sort of income I was coming in, or that could expect. And if you don't know those things, that's obviously, going to set you up for some bad times.
Yeah.
So, I once you get into it, obviously it's about prioritizing where you're spending it, but if you don't have a certain runway or a certain ability to sustain your business for 6 months to a year, then that's going to be really tough. And that stinks too, because we should all have that opportunity to start our own business and to make the most out of ourselves. And if you really hustle, you can do it. But if you don't have a certain amount of runway, man, that's really tough for me to advise somebody to give up a full-time job and pursue something that could possibly fail and cripple them financially, if they're not ready for it.
And honestly, I think that's why a lot of businesses fail, is because, and I'll say this personally, I started 3 years ago with my business, and luckily I'm still here, but I met a lot of people who started around the same time as me, and they ended up closing those businesses down not even necessarily because the business wasn't doing great. It was because they didn't have the runway to adjust their lifestyle to be able to keep the business going, right? So to your point, one of the things that I work with a lot of clients is before you start a business. So I have a lot of clients who reach out to me and say, I want to start a business. I'm like, the first thing I will tell you to do before you start your business is get your personal finances in order. Because if you can't handle your own finances, I don't know how you're going to be able to handle the finances of a real business, because it's a lot more complicated than just figuring out where you're spending your money on clothes and all that. So if you can't even do that, that's going to be a lot harder. So I think that's a great tip. So this is my favorite thing. Let me ask you a question. What does drinking wine have in common with investing in your IRA, 401k, college funds, and other investments? I'm laughing because I love wine, and all of those things is probably like my 5 favorite things. So on May 21st at Total Wine & More in the Myers Park location, Family Wealth Partners will share 4 myths about investing your money and 4 myths about wine tasting. And you can discover what can be done to improve your outcome and experience with both money and wine. How amazing is that? So you can learn more and register today at fwpevents.com. So if you're interested in learning more about what they do and you also love wine, come check us out. So we're going to take a little bit of a break and get reset for our next segment. So stay tuned. And we are back from our break. And I'm super excited for this next segment because we have another live story. I want to introduce you guys to Angela. Let's give Angela a round of applause here. Woo!
Yay.
And so Angela is someone that I've met. How long ago did we meet? Maybe 2?
I think right around 2
years ago?
Yeah, somewhere in there, 2 years.
2 years ago. So Angela, we met because she is an aspiring entrepreneur as well. And we met because she was helping out with a bunch of stuff that I was doing for my dress business. And then I got to know her and her family a little bit more. But what she is here today is because she is on her own debt-free journey.
Yay!
Yay! And we're going to get right into what she's been up to and some tips, because I will tell you, her situation is completely different from mine, and that's one of the things that I want to share as part of this $1 million campaign, is that there's lots of things that worked for me, but everyone's situation is different, and I want to be able to share that a lot of these tips apply to your life, and maybe there's some tips that I don't have because it didn't happen to me. So that's why I want to bring other people on the show so you can learn more about what might work for you in your daily life. So, Angela, first off, let's talk about your debt, right?
Yes.
So how much debt are we talking about that you're looking to pay off?
So we started January 1st, 2019 with $94,107 of debt, which was a soul-crushing number. Soul-crushing. My husband and I were both in school, so we're in our 30s, and both of us graduated a little late. Mm-hmm. We've got 3 kids, so that number to us was just like, while we were in school, just, overwhelming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we set a goal for this year to own both of our cars, which would be $32,250. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the way that we were able to take a big swallow, because $94,000 is just too big to tackle.
Yeah. So when you think about that huge number, it can feel, like you said, very overwhelming.
Right.
So one of the things that you already kind of shared this tip is to break down that goal into what are some visual things that kind of attribute to that goal that you can feel like makes it more manageable, right? So you're looking at paying off your cars.
Right. And actually, so next month we will own one of them.
Ooh!
So yay, we're halfway there.
And for people in the future, we're in May right now, so we started in January, and by next month they're already going to have one of the cars paid off. And so how much debt have you guys paid off so far since January?
So far since January 1st, we've paid off $12,109.99.
Woo! I like it. And 99 cents. One of the things I love about her is she's very exact. So the 99 cents is very important.
Yes. Well, I was actually debating, should I round it up or
no, girl. Every
penny
I was like,
no, let me just leave it exactly the way that it is. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So we're in May, so that's a couple $1,000s per month already.
Yes. So we actually we met with you in February and did our consultation because we have 3 children, and like I said, my husband was in school.
In the South, bless your heart.
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
3 children. Yeah.
Yes. It feels like 400 most of the time, but anyways, and so we had made a decision in January. We took all of our Christmas money, a good chunk of our savings, and threw it at his truck. So our first payment was actually $6,000.
Amazing.
So
how hard was that to do that?
It was really scary, but at the same time, we were already both on that page. You know, he was graduating. We knew that we were going to have a little bit more wiggle room. So, you know, it was just, we just went with it. Like, that was the decision. We felt comfortable with it. And so we just did.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, you know, you paid that in January and we met in February. So one thing to note, right, is when I met Angela, she was already thinking about this. She was already starting on this journey. She obviously had the motivation to do it. But when we met, right, it was more talking about what is the plan kind of going forward, right? So can you share a little bit about how you felt that that session went?
Yeah, so I actually felt that it went really, really well. It was great. So my husband and I, the way that we communicate and our perception about this issue is a little bit different. And so, and my husband said, Justin said the same thing when we talked to you. He's like, I'm so glad that we have somebody that speaks about this the way that you do, because we really are on the same page. And, you know, just kind of getting that comfort, like knowing that there was someone else that went through it, that did it, and how they did that, how they made decisions, how they let life come at them, and let that change what the plan was. Because I'm so detail-oriented, I have a plan, and that's what I want to follow to the T.
Yep.
So, and life doesn't let you do that.
Yes, and let's talk about that.
Yes, yes.
So one of the reasons I asked Angela to come is because life has not gone as planned.
No, not at all.
So we met in February. We put this plan in place. We said, okay, this is kind of what we're going to work towards just for the next couple of months.
Right.
And, you know, it'll be great. And then what happened?
So we met on February 1st or 2nd, and February 9th our house flooded. Flooded. And you know, at our meeting, we had talked about how much of what was left of our savings were we going to throw at this, and you had suggested keeping $1,000 emergency fund, and I was like, I don't know, we have no idea what an emergency could cost.
Right.
8 days later, we were given the education on what an emergency could cost.
The School of Hard Knocks, huh?
Yes, absolutely. So our house flooded, and we had to move. I was also in a car accident, got a speeding ticket. So that was fun. And then we had...
the speeding must have been fun.
Yeah, it was great. And we had several of our kids actually get sick. So there was a point where I didn't work at all for a month. And that was really horrifying, especially considering we had just, you know, thrown so much of our money at this. And, you know, but we've had a lot of support from family. And even a little bit of financial help, like my dad helped me with my car, and I graciously accepted, like, you know, very, very, very grateful for that, because it allowed us to kind of stay on this path.
Yeah.
And then one of the other ways that we really tried to tackle all of these things that were being thrown at us was we kept our goal in mind. So our goal for each month is to pay $2,000 a month towards our debt. And I would say since our house flooded, it hasn't been quite that, but it's been really close. Like last month we paid $1,900.
Okay, so you're off by $100. I think that still deserves some claps, right? Some snaps here.
So and we so what we did, obviously things were destroyed in the flood. We had to move. So all of our bedroom furniture was destroyed. We had so we had a custom wooden bookshelf that had to be repaired. So we had, you know, just random things. And what we did was we contacted our insurance company and we found out exactly what was going to be covered before we made any purchases. What was
so smart?
Yes. What were we going to get back from them before we did anything? And then based on that number, we chose what we were going to replace or repair. So there were quite a few things that we did not replace. Our house looks really interesting right now, but that's okay. We did get a new bedroom set, and I really like it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, but so none of that, our insurance money, we never had to come out of pocket. We did temporarily, so I was grateful that we did keep our credit cards, which have no balance.
Yep.
So that kind of bought us the time to save us from the cash flow issue. But so we just kept our goal in mind. We eat in all the time. We still do dinners at home. We pack lunches when we go to work and things like that. All of these little things really helped us to stay on this path, especially with 3 small kids.
Amazing. First of all, when you told me that, well, one, I saw it on Facebook first, I think, and then we talked on the phone, and I was like, what happened?
Right.
And you're surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, because I feel like you're really good at this stuff, but I would have been probably like a train wreck, and you're like, you're a lot calmer about it than I probably would have been. And I think some things that you just talked about that were really smart is, one, you looked at, like you said, what the insurance was going to cover first, and then made the purchase. A lot of people would go out and just make the purchases or assume that they have to replace everything
Right.
all at once, and that's where a lot of people get into some serious trouble.
Right.
So that's really smart. And another thing that you talked about is credit cards, right? So a lot of people who know me know that I don't use credit cards, and they assume that when I sit down with them on their sessions and I'm going to be like, you need to cut these credit cards up immediately, and like you're not going to be allowed to use them. And I look at every situation very differently, right? And I look at, okay, well, what is your income? You know, what is your spending habits with credit cards? What else have you got going on? And, you know, maybe the long-term goal is not to rely on the credit cards as much, but, you know, like, it is helpful to have those in place for things like that, knowing if you're going to be really responsible about it. So just because I don't do something doesn't mean that that's necessarily what is prescribed to everybody, but also at the same time is, you know, looking again at your situation and seeing what you know that you can do within your own means and knowing what your habits are. That's what a lot of what I work with on clients. And when we looked at your budget too, when we looked at what you and Justin were doing, like, you guys weren't incredibly irresponsible. It wasn't like huge credit cards and all this stuff. It was mostly student loans.
So our student loans were the primary amount of debt that we had. And, you know, I'm really proud and grateful to say that he and I, our combined student loans are the national average for what one person graduates with. Mm-hmm. So we had just over $60,000 in loans between us. So
I love that you know that stat. I'm like, I had no idea what that.
Most people will graduate with at least $60,000 in student loans, and that was our collective loan debt.
Oh yeah.
And we don't own a home yet, and so that was one of the reasons that we started this journey. Like, you know, we were in college, we already have 3 kids, and so in some ways we're behind on where we would like to be for our children. You know, their savings, their education. And what really attracted me to Crush This Debt and to what you were doing, even before it was a podcast, was the fact that when you attack this debt, you know, not only do you get that sense of financial freedom, but your savings becomes exponential. And it becomes exponential for years before you need to retire or need to pay for those things. So we can tackle all this debt, get debt-free by 40, which is the goal.
Yay!
With a house.
Yay!
And still, you know, kind of catch up to where I guess we feel like we should be. Because we see all these people around us, and I think one of the biggest pitfalls that we fall into as a couple and individually is that we will look at other people and the cars that they're driving or the houses that they're living in, and we will judge our insides by somebody else's outsides. Mm-hmm. We don't have any idea how much money they make or whether or not they're living beyond their means.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have been really good about, even before we went on this journey, is making financially responsible decisions. You know, the average that I paid on my credit card monthly last year was $110 a month, and it was paid off in full every month.
Yeah.
So, you know, we felt comfortable keeping our credit cards to solve those cash flow issues, because with 3 small children, we were nervous about just a $1,000 emergency fund.
Right.
So, and it came in handy, and we don't have credit card debt even after all of that drama.
Yeah.
So,
which is amazing, and again, why I asked you to come, because this is such a life lesson in the sense of, and even a lesson for me as I've been working with other people, is that life is going to come at you.
Yes.
It's not predictable at all. We can put a plan in place, but on this debt-free journey, there's going to be so many things that are going to happen along the way when you're trying to tackle that. And if you let, which, to be fair, if you let the flood and the car accident and all that stuff, like, I wouldn't have blamed you if you're like...
it did a little bit, for sure. I had a panic attack or two.
If you're like, oh, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
But you still kept to it.
Yes.
And, you know, I think that's a big piece of what we talk about, which in Crush This Debt, the C is change your mindset, and R is redesign your life. And that some of those things that we talked about, and I think you said it earlier, was, you know, you and Justin, and when we were sitting down, we talked about what are the things that you guys are looking forward to, and what are the goals you're trying to reach. So that goal of being, you know, debt-free by the time you're 40 and owning a house, that's such a great goal to have. But I'm sure that's what's keeping you guys on track, right?
And then, you know, even with all of this, like, we're planning our first ever Disney vacation with our kids. That's going to be this year, and we are going to go to Disney without debt.
Yes.
So in addition, and one of the things...
Debt-free Disney.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited. And I love that you put out that thing, you know, about how to go to Disney without debt. I was like, ooh! You know, but we... And that's something that for me, I think, has been a little bit harder for me to swallow with the flood, because it would have been easier and we wouldn't have had to slow down our, you know, expected $2,000 a month. but I've reached a point where I'm okay with it because I don't think most people can say that they have paid off an additional $12,000 in debt in a year. So even
and
if,
still go to Disney.
right, and still go to Disney without debt. But so even if like that were that, you know, I would feel really proud of what we've achieved so far, but we're going to keep it going. And if we slow down a little bit to do some of these things that we want to do, great, because like Andy said, money isn't everything. You know, it is a thing and it is something that we need, but it's not everything. And for us, the idea of being debt-free and supporting our children is, you know, we want to have family time together and we want to do things like take singing lessons or in-home yoga or go to Disney. And we are going to do that, and we're going to do it as debt-free as humanly possible. So
Yay.
hopefully we don't get too much more life this year. Knock on wood.
Good life, anyway.
Yes.
Life at Disney and all of that. So, last thing I'll ask the same thing that I kind of asked Andy, is if you had one tip to give people who are just starting out, so you're about 5 months in now into your debt-free journey, what is one tip that you'd give people?
So I think the number one thing I would say, outside of things that have already been said, like take a good hard look at your finances, really break down what you spend and where, would be, I think my husband and I are the H in Crush. We are the hustle. So I do all kinds of stuff. So does he. We take on all kinds of odd jobs. And that works really well for us. Neither of us have a specific 9 to 5. And finding other ways that you can earn money. And sometimes I get money back for things that I already spend money on. I get cash back on my gas. I get paid for every receipt that I keep for groceries or clothing stores. I sell all of my kids' clothes pretty much at the end of the year when they need new clothes. So all of those things go back in, and it's just really analyzing your life and looking at what you can do with what you have and how you can maximize what you already own. And a lot of those are skills. We own our own skills, and we need to figure out how, or I need to figure out how I can best use those to get what I want, to get debt-free and make a better life for my family.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, it's not easy to talk about these things, especially in a public forum like this. So your transparency is so refreshing. You've been posting some really cool tips yourself. So if people want to find you on social media, how can they find you?
So I am on Instagram as angela.stowe.nicholson and Angela Stowe Nicholson on Facebook. So you can look at me there. I do a lot of DIY, a lot of things that can help you save cash on kids' parties or
which is not my specialty at all.
No.
And she has some really cool tips about kid stuff, for sure.
Yeah. So I do, I'm an event planner on the side. I work by referral. And I do, of course, my own kids' parties. And I have yet to spend more than $400 on a child's party, all decorations, everything included. And I like to share those things, different things that we do as a family, too, that are totally free.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And stay tuned for our next segment.